The world looks to California to answer the hard questions, for redemption, to introduce the unfamiliar, to be resilient. Because California bounces back, holds us accountable, values who we are, remains vigilant, defies those in our way, and stands for community. Here on the West Coast, we're at the center of it all. Los Angeles Times, the state of what's next.
Good evening. I'm Mark Olsen, film writer at the Los Angeles Times, sitting in for Justin Chang, and welcome to week 10 of the Ultimate Summer Movie Showdown, the LA Times series where our readers choose the greatest summer movies of all time. With theaters closed and major Hollywood releases being held back due to the COVID-19 pandemic, my Times colleagues and I asked ourselves, what if instead of no summer movie season, we had the best summer movie season? And so we came up with the Ultimate Summer Movie Showdown, where here's how it works. Every week, for 16 weeks, we're compiling some of the best, most memorable movies that were released each week since 1975, the summer of Jaws. And we're letting all of you vote on your favorites in a series of head-to-head competitions posted on the Twitter feed of our film critic, Justin Chang. And so this week, our readers voted for the beloved time travel comedy Back to the Future. And so there's a lot to talk about there. And I'm quite excited that our guest this week is Leah Thompson, who was the star not only of Back to the Future, but also the sequels, parts 2 and 3, and has also appeared in movies such as Some Kind of Wonderful, All the Right Moves, and Red Dawn, and has since gone on to have a very fine career as an episodic television director on shows such as The Goldbergs, Mom, and Young Sheldon, and made her feature directing debut with The Year of Spectacular Men, in which she appeared along with her daughters, Zoe Deutsch and Madeline Deutsch. So please, Leah Thompson, thank you so much for joining us.
I am so excited to be here. Yay!
And now, how are things going for you? How has your summer been so far?
Pretty good, all things considered. I'm having some creative times. I did a podcast that my daughter put together, my daughter Zoe, along with Gavin Polone, and it's a narrative podcast. So we play mother and daughter, and we switch bodies. So it was fun. So at least I got to go into a booth and do some acting. So I've been doing that and a lot of development stuff. But yeah, it's a crazy time, right?
I know. Wait, has that podcast come out, or when does that come out?
I think it's going to come out in a little while. It's on Audible, so they don't tell me. I'm just talent, So I think in a month maybe. Yeah, it was very cool. A great cast.
I know. If you're anything like me, I am very much missing like summer movies. And so first of all, I just want to ask, like, what do summer movies kind of mean to you? Like, do you have some favorites, or what do you think about when you think of a summer movie?
Oh, I don't know. I think of Shakespeare in Love. I love that movie. I don't know why I think that's a summer movie, but there's been some good stuff online. But of course, now it just goes straight off my head. But my husband and I are really enjoying binge watching TV shows and movies, and we watch a lot of old films. Really old, like from the 30s and the 40s. I don't know why. It's fun to watch how they shoot things, because my husband and I are both directors. My husband's Howard Deutsch. He directed Pretty in Pink and Some Kind of Wonderful and The Great Outdoors and The Replacement. So we're both directors. So now it's really fun to watch movies from that perspective, that we're both like, I like that shot. No, I don't like that shot. It's kind of funny.
No, wait, are you actually kind of breaking things down as you're watching them?
Sometimes. I mean, usually if the movie's really good, you don't. But if you're not enjoying the movie, you start watching the shots. Or if the sound is off. That's a really good way to study a movie, if you're a filmmaker, is to turn the sound off, and then you can really watch it shot by shot. It's so much easier to not get involved in the narrative.
And now, before we kind of get started and talking about Back to the Future, I want to ask you kind of about your career leading up to that. I mean, you'd been in like a handful of movies already. There was Jaws 3D, Red Dawn, All the Right Moves, The Wildlife. Like, what are your recollections, or where do you kind of think your career was before you got the part in Back to the Future?
I don't know. I mean, I was like a really a fish out of water when I came to Hollywood. I kind of lied and said I was more of an actress than I was when I got my first movie, Jaws 3D. I mean, obviously, if you watch the film, you can see that I was not great. So you can tell that I wasn't trained at Juilliard. But I never thought I'd live in Los Angeles. I never aspired to be a movie star. So it happened so quickly that I was trying to play catch up the whole time and try to learn my craft on the set. So that's a kind of a scary way to learn. And so I don't know, I didn't really think about my career. I was just kind of like wandering around trying to fake my way into this business. And but I did, approach it really seriously, because I was a ballet dancer, and that's such a disciplined existence that I tried to apply that kind of love of the craft and of art to my acting. And so I was really always from the very beginning interested in doing different styles of acting, doing different kinds of characters. And even from that young kind of career, that those movies that you're talking about, I did really different parts, played really different people. And that's why I was so drawn to the character of Lorraine McFly, because it was so many different characters in one person. It really required acting, it required skill to pull that off, to create this, really crazy character and all these different aspects of her. So, of course, the part really spoke to me right away. Because even in my dancing career, I did all kinds of different styles of ballets. And I always appreciate artists that don't just stick to one thing, that have versatility. And, in writing and music and singing, I like people who can do that. So that's what I aspired to, even as a young, completely inexperienced actress in Hollywood.
And then how did you get the part in Back to the Future? Like, what was the audition process like for that?
Oh my gosh. They just showed me a clip of me auditioning with C. Thomas Howell that they're going to put in some new bonus feature. And so they had to ask me for approval. And I don't remember it, but it's a funny thing to see me and C. Thomas Howell, who I actually knew from Red Dawn. We were really good friends, because Red Dawn was an intense experience filming. So, we had been running around with machine guns, in the dirt, in the snow for 4 months. So anyway, it's funny to think about the audition process and all of that. I mean, I have a crappy memory. I realized it's only was saved for lines. Like, my memory is only about learning lines all these years. So anything that has to do with anything else, I just forget to save space for lines. I wonder if there's other actors like that. But I do remember there were multiple auditions, and I think what happened was they were looking at Eric Stoltz, because we did a movie called The Wildlife for Universal, and they were looking at Eric Stoltz on the chem, those old machines where the film went through, and they were like, "Who's that girl?" And this is what I think happened. And then they called me in for an audition, and of course I was really excited because it was a great part, and a part that I somehow understood. Sometimes you don't know. Like, sometimes you think you're going to be good at a part and you're not. Sometimes things just fit like a glove. And when I first read the part, it just fit like a glove. I understood all the characters. So it was a fun experience. And I remember my screen test, and I had to wear a wig to play the old Lorraine, and Steven Spielberg was there. And of course, everyone knows he's a real mensch. He's like a great guy. And I remember him putting me at ease and making me feel at home. And he was working one of those big giant, video cameras at the time. And it was a great moment for me, because I knew I aced it.
And then what do you think it was about the role that you understood so well? Why do you think it spoke to you so clearly?
Well, I wasn't her. I wasn't Lorraine McFly. I was a woman who grew up in the 60s and 70s. I was raised by, card-carrying ACLU socialist father, union guy. I was a modern dancer. I was a feminist. I was like all these things that you wouldn't think would fit with Lorraine McFly, but I understood her for some reason. I understood what her repression and her, I did a lot of research. I read a lot of magazines from the 50s and found like crazy things, like you're supposed to douche with Lysol to make your husband love you. Like, there was crazy stuff in those magazines. And I was like, it was always like, your husband doesn't love you because you don't clean well enough, and all this crazy propaganda. And I enjoyed playing that propaganda, playing against it at the time. I really understood the craziness of what was going on in the 50s, and I kind of enjoyed distilling that into the character. I know that sounds kind of radical, but that's something, and it was fun for me to play against it. I mean, that's how you get good comedy, play real truth. And you get, so you really understand the character and where they're coming from.
Because it's interesting to hear you say that you felt like there were a lot of sort of aspects to Lorraine, or there were a lot of sort of different characters within this one character, because she is kind of at once like the love interest, she's a comic foil in some scenes, she often is like the straight man in certain scenes. Like well, on the one hand, it's kind of a very straightforward character. There is something really complicated about it. There's like a lot going on there.
Well, yeah, and they really, the story really relied on carefully navigating these moments very quickly. Like if you take the scene in the car where Biff is molesting her, and she has to come out, and she has to look at George, and George punches her, and then she has to fall in love with George, and in 1 second, and then the scene where I'm trying kind of to seduce my own son, and then I kiss him, and then at that moment I realize something's completely wrong. Something reaches back out of time and shows, and I know something's completely wrong. There were a lot of incredible moments that required the actors to convince the audience completely of these crazy things that were occurring. And so, we were all of us were completely, deeply committed to going on that ride, because sometimes I think of it as a needle, like threading a needle through something, the kind of precision comedy that Bob Zemeckis demanded. You had to have these dramatic moments, and you had to hit these jokes exactly, and then you had to come back up for air. It's like dancing, and we were all in. I mean, it's such an amazing thing to show up for a movie, and the cast is so perfect, and everything you need is right there. It's not all the time that happens. Unfortunately, sometimes you show up and, you're like, what, why, this person's not right for the part. Like, how am I going to make this work? Sometimes I've shown up and been not right for the part, to be honest. But this cast was so brilliant. It was such a joy every day to act with them.
I know you mentioned Steven Spielberg, who's an executive producer on the movie, but I'm curious about Robert Zemeckis, the director and co-writer of the movie. Now we think of him as one of the most sort of acclaimed directors in contemporary Hollywood, but when he made Back to the Future, he'd had a few films that hadn't done very well. Then he did Romancing the Stone, which had kind of really gotten him like sort of the energy to be able to make Back to the Future in the first place. What was it like the first time you met him?
He just has an incredible energy, and you could feel his excitement about getting this movie made. That was I know Bob Gale and Bob Zemeckis had tried for many years to make this movie, and I loved him from the get-go. I think he's really amazing, and I could appreciate his precision, his choreographic precision as a dancer. It didn't throw me. Some actors don't like how, I don't know if it's line readings or what it is. It's just like precision. Like he really wanted things done exactly the way he wanted to do it, which is the way he heard it. And I consider that fun. Some people don't, but I did. And I think he was just so excited to get the movie made.
Because to me, it's so interesting in that I think we often think of him as a more technical director, like the special effects on something like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, or even in Back to the Future. But the performances in his movies, and in Back to the Future is a great example of this, are really sort of lived in and very emotional. Like, what was he like as a director? Like, and do you feel like you learned anything from working with him that you've taken forward now that you're directing yourself?
I feel like I've taken a lot from him as a director, because I appreciate that he never took the audience for granted, that he always wanted to stuff in as much excitement into every frame, story into every single moment. That if it didn't further the story or the character, it had to go. Uh, that he wasn't precious, but he, was he was he firm, when he knew something was supposed to be done a certain way. And I've taken a lot from him as a director. I don't like to waste the audience's time. I try to make things funny, but also move the story forward. I also know deeply from doing Caroline in the City, a sitcom for a long time, that if the story's confusing, the audience can't laugh. If the character does something out of character, the audience can't laugh. He was very uh, thorough in that way. He's a really good writer too, so that helps. But my favorite memory is that he was always so excited when he thought up something new, like a little kid, like giggling, like when he would like, oh, what if we add this to that, or if something really worked well, he was excited. I mean, I'm sure he remembers the pain because all directors only remember it's like a battle, but I remember him being excited, and that was fun. It was fun for me to make him happy.
And now, not just Back to the Future, but a lot of the movies that you were in that around that time, Some Kind of Wonderful, All the Right Moves. I mean, these are like some of the quintessential movies of the 1980s now. What was that like for you at the time? Did it feel like you were really part of like a scene of actors or filmmakers? Like, what did that moment in Hollywood feel like?
I always just felt like I was not excluded from the. I always felt like I was excluded from the brat pack. Like I wasn't cool. I think I never really felt cool, or like part of something like that. I mean, if I think those things, those kind of feelings come in retrospect. But I'm also have always been a bit of an iconoclast.
Mm-hmm.
I like didn't really want to be part of like the groovy gang, or because I always want to be an artist, and I always want to like feel like I'm not too separated from who I was, a poor girl from Minnesota. Like I don't know, I didn't ever want to feel I didn't understand that, so I really wasn't part of that, any kind of cool group. I was more of a goofball, like I still am, as you can tell.
But still, I mean, that's a tremendous body of movies that you were in at that time.
Yeah, I was super lucky to work with a lot of great people and do a lot of crazy parts. I mean, I had so much fun on Red Dawn. It was insane. Like just the running around New Mexico with with Patrick Swayze and C. Thomas Howell and Jennifer Grey and all these classic actors and these tanks, and it was insane. And the horses and stunts. That was really fun for me. And All the Right Moves. Tom Cruise was like so great to me. Was so nice and helpful, and it's just everything was so new and exciting and fun. I mean, I worked at one point. I worked a year and a half with like a week off. I did Back to the Future, Space Camp, and then Howard the Duck. And that was like 3 crazy different characters and completely different kinds of movies. That part was exciting. The working was really exciting.
And now, one thing I find really fascinating with regards to Back to the Future is that it has this kind of unusual production story that's something I think for a lot of other movies people would try to like not talk about or like smooth over. And the fact that the movie filmed for a number of weeks with Eric Stoltz, who you'd already worked with, and then he was recast with Michael J. Fox. And it's fascinating to me that like no one's ever tried to like hide this fact, even though it's something that I think a lot of productions, they would sort of try to get past that quickly. What was that like to have like shot like a good chunk of the movie with one actor and then that part gets recast?
It was really sad. It was very sad for me. I mean, I love Eric Stoltz. and I loved him, and I did Some Kind of Wonderful with him afterwards. And so it was scary and sad for everybody. But it's that weird thing that happens when you're like, I'm just glad it's not me. Because I really thought it was going to be me, because I was, at the time, I was engaged to Dennis Quaid, and he was making a even bigger bomb than Howard the Duck called Enemy Mine in Munich, I think. Yeah. And so I wanted to go see him, and I had 2 weeks off. So I wasn't supposed to go. And I flew to Munich to see Dennis. And it was way back, I called into my answering machine, and it was like, Steven Spielberg and Bob Zemeckis and Bob Gale. And my age, everybody called in, and I was like, oh my God, they found out and they're firing me. And then I found out it was Eric. So I was like, phew. But the same way, it's a business. It's a brutal business. And I think they made the right choice for sure, or whatever. Eric, it was a completely different movie. He was very, he had these quirks of that, kind of coming out of the 70s kind of thing, where people should call you your character name and all of that. It just didn't go over well with everybody. His approach, I mean, he's so beautiful looking too. His approach was just not, he didn't have a big comedy thing going on, and everyone else did. I mean, we're all doing giant characters in the movie if you watch it. And Crispin Glover, who's a genius, was doing some kind of weird commedia dell'arte moves. But Biff, he was doing these like really weird things, like incredible. And Chris Lloyd is out there just going balls to the wall, just like, where did you want hour? Just like so big. And I'm like this weird kitten thing I was doing. And then you plop Eric in, and he was just doing he was doing more of a realistic movie. And, I remember him saying after the read through, this is actually a tragedy. Everybody he knows has a memory of a past that he doesn't. And I was like, don't say that, Eric. But it was true. Like, if you really approached it as an actor, that's how, that was true. But when you introduced Michael, who was doing, the classic Buster Keaton double take, spit take, fall down thing, it just with effortlessly, with all his training in a sitcom, he just fit right in the and Tom Wilson was doing this big character. We were all just doing these big characters, and so Michael fit right in with that. So it was weird, but 6 weeks into shooting.
And did you then sort of recalibrate your performance to Michael, or do you feel like you sort of were still doing the same performance that you were from earlier?
Well, that was one of the hard things about it. They left some of the shots, some close-ups and things. When they replaced him, they left some of my shots from Eric, which I was like, well, I want to play it a little different. Not that I could pick them out. I think my hair looks really weird, and so you can tell. But I think that happened to some of the other actors, and everybody was like, yeah. I hadn't shot that much. I'd shot the scene where he wakes up in my bedroom and comes down to the living room and has dinner. I can't remember what else I shot, but not that much with Eric. But they did keep some shots from that. And you can really tell in the skateboard chase, you can tell because all of a sudden he changes into this weird outfit and his hair's slicked back and dark. And the stunt guy's a lot taller. So they kept all those skateboard stunts that they did with Eric and just replaced Michael. And then all of a sudden he's not in that costume. They were like, well, that's just the way it's going to be.
That's probably the kind of thing that in 1985, people were less likely to spot that sort of thing. You know, you're just going to the movies. I mean, eventually you'd get it on VHS, but it probably didn't seem as like likely to be spotted as it would be if you tried to do something like that in a movie now.
I don't know. I think the story's so good, and the filmmaking's so lovely that you just like I said, I wouldn't notice the shots in Back to the Future because it's so good.
But now, when Michael came on, he was actually shooting Back to the Future and his television show Family Ties at the same time. So, like, did that just make the production feel hectic? Like, what did that sort of do to you to have your co-star be doing double duty like that?
I just felt sorry for him that he was so exhausted. I think it was harder on Chris Lloyd because he had to go back and do some of those scenes with so much energy, like the scene with the Libyan terrorists and all of that craziness where you first see the DeLorean. I think it was hard on Chris because it required so much energy to do that character. But you know, actually, they had to pay us the same. They didn't pay us any more for that. Shooting the 6 weeks. But it was, I just felt bad for him for being exhausted.
I know, I want to be sure to ask you, you mentioned that sort of like basically the first scene in the movie when you're with Michael, he sort of like wakes up in your bedroom and then you go downstairs to have like a family dinner together. And first of all, I heard you say in another interview that you have been asked many times to sign purple Calvin Klein underwear, like the which Michael is wearing in that scene.
Yes. Only a few times were they actually on a person, which I then respectfully declined. But yes, people take them, if they take them out of the package and ask me to sign them, I will sign their purple underwear. But what was funny was Us magazine, I think, put Michael and I on their cover for like a reunion issue. And so they did this big photo shoot in New York. And I guess I was the only one that could scare up. So it was just Michael and I. And the photographer was really fancy. It was one of those fancy shoots with the music going and like, oh, the stylist and the fancy dresses. And the guy like bends down. I should remember the famous photographer, but my brain's broken. He bends over and he's wearing purple Calvin Klein underwear. And I go, did you plan that? And he was like, what? Okay. He said he didn't plan wearing purple Calvin Klein underwear, but I don't believe him.
But now that scene, the scene in the bedroom, it's such a funny scene, and your performance is so terrific. Like I put it as respectfully and politely as I can. You just want to eat him alive. Like you're really like very into him in that moment. And what was that scene like to play? And was it always like written as sort of funny as the way that you're playing it?
Well, hopefully. I mean, I think maybe that's why I got the part, because I injected so much frustrated sexuality into the character, which I thought was hilarious. So they just let me go with it. They thought that was hilarious. And it was written in there. I mean, the more pressure I put on him, the funnier he could be. And that was the fun part about doing it with Michael, is that he really responded to it. And he had a difficult thing to do. Like he couldn't actually feel it. You know what I mean? It was those are the best kinds of scenes, when two people want something completely different and they're both trying to get it so desperately. And it's a great scene. It was, I mean, and I feel incredibly honored to be mostly known for that part, because it's a great part. Freaking hilarious part.
And then you mentioned Crispin Glover as well, who I'm a huge fan of. And there's this scene in like a soda shop. It's kind of the first real scene the two of you have together. And he does bring this really unusual energy that's different from what everybody else in the movie is doing. And for you as a performer, like, how do you kind of figure out how to respond to that? When someone comes in with something like totally their own, what do you kind of do? What do you give back to that?
Well, first of all, it's a gift from heaven. When someone's that good, you're only as good as your scene partner. So he was so funny. I mean, just so funny. And that scene when he, I think, are you talking about the one where he says, "You're my density, you're
Exactly.
my destiny"? He was just so open. There was something so open about his heart that was so great in that scene. Because what was interesting was that he was lying, but he actually did kind of fall in love with me at that moment. And I loved that. It's such a complicated choice, and that's you know that's where really good acting comes in. I kind of think of it as pickup sticks. Like you keep adding the sticks on, like the different intentions and the different things. Like a good actor, a bad actor can do one thing, and then a good actor can do like these things, and then a really great one can do like all of that without falling apart. And that's what Crispin could do. I just thought he could put in like panic and fear and love and fury, and like he could just squish it all up into one thing and make it great. So I remember just being in awe of his. It took him a lot to get there. He was kind of undisciplined, but once he got there, and that's all that really matters, he got there, and it was amazing.
Like it would take a lot of takes for him to do it?
No, but there was a certain amount of emotional, you know, especially men, I guess a lot of women, but some people need to create a certain energy around them in order to be good. They have to create some kind of thing that can be uncomfortable for other people that aren't artists. And he definitely could do that. But I loved him. And I remember so vividly when we did Back to the Future 2, when we were getting ready to do Back to the Future 2, which ended up being Back to the Future 2 and 3, they brought us all we all went to Amblin to watch Back to the Future 1 to get us back into because it took some time to get in the mood. And I just remember being so aware. I mean, I think I was aware at the time that Crispin wasn't going to be in Back to the Future 2. And that upset me, obviously, because he was my husband and I thought he was great. But I just remember how much everybody laughed at him, how funny he was at every single beat. And I was like, you guys, work it out, get him back. And that was upsetting because I really thought he was great.
And that's really, as far as I know, one of the first examples where like sequels were shot, back to back the way that 2 and 3 were there. What was that experience like, shooting sequels, 2 and 3 at the same time?
Well, we didn't start out that way. It started out that we were just going to do Back to the Future 2. And then I don't read the book, so I'm not the best person to give you all this information. But from other Q&As I've done, I learned that the Back to the Future, that they were just like, this is a very long script. Why don't we just expand it? Michael's not getting any younger, and let's just do it. Let's just expand it some more and make Back to the Future 2 and 3 together. It almost killed Bob Zemeckis. He got pneumonia and it was really, really hard on him. But yeah, it was really unusual. And then they had to, go back and negotiate right when we were doing it. And it was difficult for production. It wasn't that difficult for me. I love Back to the Future 2. I think it's a great movie. And Back to the Future 3 is so different. It's just so kind of old-fashioned and uplifting. And Back to the Future 2 is so dark. They're a weird collection of movies.
Well, especially now watching Back to the Future 2 in the year 2020, when it is set in the year of the future, 2015, there's something that just makes it even more like funny and outrageous that it's now set in this, past version of the future.
I know, isn't it true? I'm not sure how it holds up. I mean, I guess I've seen it a couple, like 5 years ago, maybe. But yeah, I mean, everyone brings up the Biff and the Biff is Trump, and they bring that all up all the time. And like that alternate reality is what we have here, but we're not talking politics. But that poor Tom Wilson has to deal with that.
But now I want to be sure to ask you from the first film, you mentioned the scene that takes place like during the party scene towards the end. There's a long sequence where you're like in a car and you kind of have a scene with Michael, and then it sort of transitions into a scene with Biff. And first of all, the section of it when you're with Michael, it's kind of one of the famous moments in the movie when the two of you kiss and your character sort of, says, oh, this doesn't quite feel right. And I've heard you say before that Bob Zemeckis and Bob Gale were like really nervous about that moment because they knew that a lot of what could potentially make people uncomfortable in the movie was going to kind of live or die in that scene and in that kiss. Like, what was that like to shoot and to know that there was sort of so much writing on it?
I remember that there was a lot of pressure from Bob Zemeckis. He was really worried about it. He was really trying hard to get this shot he couldn't get. He wanted to get this shot with me kissing him and one eye open, but there was no way to see both of my eyes, to see the one eye open. I was like, I'm sorry, I can't help you. It's just, I don't know how to, in this old stinky car, on a stage. I remember we did that there. And I remember, yeah, they were really, and I really understand now as a director, it's a little bit harder to understand as an actor how much is riding on a moment. And, of course, Michael was just always funny and always awesome and joking around. And we put real booze in the flask, to kind of lighten up the mood at one point. And that's all I remember, that it was, it's always interesting when, just a kind of a change in attitude has to change the whole plot, in the acting, from the acting standpoint, when it's not like a big plot point. It's not like I found something or anything. I had to do it all. We had to be with the story, and I had to do it all at that moment. And one of the things that I always thought was such a tribute to the filmmaking was, in the beginning when I go, take the cake and I go, your Uncle Joey didn't make parole again. And I put down the cake, and then they pay, that's the setup for the joke. And then when Michael Fox, like 40 minutes into the show, goes, looks at the little baby in the playpen and goes, get used to those bars, kid. The audience remembers. It's like 40 minutes between the setup and the punchline, and the audience remembers. Now that's really good filmmaking. He had a way of telling the audience that they needed to concentrate because it was going to pay off. Now, most of the time movies, it's not like that. Like, it doesn't pay off in the end, but he had a way of pointing things out. Here's the plutonium, and here's the news, and nothing was wasted, and the audience knew it to pay attention. I love that about the movie.
And now when the movie came out and it was such a huge success, what did that kind of do for you in the moment? Like, what did it mean to you and your career, like at that time?
Well, success is always better than failure, I think. Because quite soon after that, I had Howard the Duck come out. So I knew, the same year, actually. So I lost my earring, but that's okay. Here, we know it's here. It was joyous. It was lovely. It was lovely. And it still is lovely that people voted it. You guys voted for this. Thank you. It's happy. And but the way that it's survived for all these years in people's hearts and minds is surprising, I think, to everybody that's involved. You never think that 35 years later, you want to talk to me for an hour about the future. That's so, it's once in a lifetime. It's great because it's magical when a movie comes together and totally works like that, for people. And I think that there's a lot of elements of the movie that make it transcendent. One, that it's a good movie; two, that it's funny; three, that different generations can relate to it in different ways. Four, it's got this incredible message, which I think is that, from my perspective, it's that if you stand up for yourself, if you make the right decision for one moment in your life, it can change everything. It can change your family's life. It can change everything if you have the courage of your convictions. I think, that's really important, and that your parents are people too. So also the fact that it was nostalgic for the 50s, now it's nostalgic for the 80s, that helped it. So it feels good to be part of something that makes people happy. I mean, we all need that. I mean, right now with COVID and everything, I really can understand why art and entertainment are so important. For lifting people's spirits, for teaching them, for just helping them forget their woes. I feel incredibly lucky to have been part of that for people in their lives.
I know you mentioned the movie Howard the Duck, which did that feel like some particular, it seemed like it would be a definite lesson of Hollywood to have been in Back to the Future and to sort of right after that be in Howard the Duck, which was, not critically well received, was not the box office success that it had been hoped to be. And what was that experience like coming right after you had done Back to the Future?
Yeah, in a year. It was definitely a lesson. It gave me a very unique perspective on what matters and what doesn't. It was super painful at the time, but now, there's so many people that love it, and I made people happy with that, and I did the best job I could. So I love my Howard the Duck fans because they're like iconoclasts like me. Don't necessarily want to be told what to love or what not to love. And I think that's also part of the allure of Howard the Duck. It's this kind of anti-hero hero, trapped in a world he never made. I personally think Howard the Duck needs his due. I pitched it to Marvel, a movie that I liked about Howard the Duck. Maybe someday they'll make it.
You were going to make your own version of Howard the Duck?
I'd love to direct it. Yeah, not the movie, but another show. Not like a remake of the movie, but more of the character in the Marvel universe, which is, he was the first Marvel movie star. So now that the Marvel universe is much bigger, I think that he would fit in really well.
I would definitely watch that.
I would too. So let's tell them, come on, Marvel, let's do it. Leah Thompson directing. I know the fans. I know what they want.
But another thing with Howard the Duck is, and if I have this chronology wrong, that the script for Some Kind of Wonderful came to you, you turned it down, made Howard the Duck in the meantime, and then it sort of came back to you. Is that right?
Yes. It's a very interesting story of Some Kind of Wonderful, but way too long for this. But yes, they offered me, Howie Deutsch and John Hughes offered me Some Kind of Wonderful. I didn't like the part. It was kind of a different script. I turned it down. They hired Kim Delaney, I think, to play my part. And Howie went off the movie, and Martha Coolidge went on. Then Martha Coolidge left, and Howie came back on, and Howard the Duck came out, and I was devastated. And Eric Stoltz, who was my friend, said, hey, you want to do this? They just fired Kim Delaney. Do you want to do the part? And I was like, okay, I better get back on the horse. So that's why I did Some Kind of Wonderful. But I married the director, just about to have our 31st wedding anniversary. So
first of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
And secondly, tell me about that. What is the experience like of making a movie and falling in love with your director at the same time? I mean, that like that's the stuff of movies.
That's the stuff of movies. Well, we didn't really start dating till, I mean, I kind of on purpose, but I was also still engaged to Dennis Quaid. So we kind of waited until after he had a crush on me, but he was kind of exotic to me. I don't know. I didn't kind of think of him that way until after the movie. And I broke up with Dennis, and, we started dating after. I always knew he had a crush on me, but I don't know. I didn't want to. I didn't want to have that happen while I was, doing a movie. So it's interesting. It's hard for movie people because that's all you meet is people in movies. So I think that's why there's so many romances on movie sets. But it did last this long, so something must have been right about it.
And also, Some Kind of Wonderful is such a distinctive movie within like sort of even like the John Hughes canon. It's kind of like one of the more sort of like emotionally deeper movies. It's kind of like the most like realist film in a way. And I don't know if that's Howard's influence on the movie or not, but it stands apart from a lot of those other John Hughes movies.
Yeah, I do think it's one of the best. It also still, there's no like overt racism in it, or how there were some really spooky characters that kind of don't stand up anymore. There's kind of some weird sexism in some of his movies. I think that Some Kind of Wonderful stands apart from that. It still feels, what's the word? Like, can you help me? It just feels like you can still watch it and it doesn't feel weird. And yeah, I like that. What?
It holds up.
It holds up. And the music's amazing. And I'm still proud of the movie. I like the movie. The beginning is so great, that that kind of thing with the train and me making out with Craig Sheffer and the drummer. I think it's an incredible opening. And I think that, in that you can see, I mean, Eric Stoltz is so good in that movie. And that's it's a different kind of acting than would have been kind of appropriate in Back to the Future.
And then, as you mentioned, you eventually had your television series, Caroline in the City, which really, I think, wasn't unusual at that time for someone to be moving from, a career in movies to a career in television, because that show was a real success and lasted for quite a few years.
Yeah, it was. It was unusual. Generally thought of the kiss of death, but I wasn't getting very many movie parts. I've said this before. It's a weird thing that when you have children and you're a leading lady, when you have a baby, it changes things, and it's in the film business, and it's been that way forever. And I don't understand what it is. If you adopt a kid, you're okay, but if you have a baby, I always wonder, is it like, does it change your face or something? But anyway, I wasn't getting the part. And I had just had a baby and I was just having another baby. So I was like, I better go to TV. So I was developing for NBC, and they handed me Caroline in the City. I remember, and they were like, "This is the show you should do because it says Caroline in the City. They can't get rid of you." And I was like, "That's nice. All right." But I like the script and I like the idea. And doing a sitcom, then I had so much respect for it. I mean, because I remember when Michael Fox came to do Back to the Future, I was so snobby about that. I was like, "Oh, a sitcom actor, and can't be good." And so now once I started Caroline in the City, I really understood that it's like the hardest job in the world, because there's, no other takes, and it's in front of an audience. And that's why Michael was so good. You really hone your comedy chops. And I really enjoyed doing that. but it was really scary. I did Carolina City for 4 years. We
So
had
was
the
it
best.
from that you transitioned into directing?
I didn't direct Caroline in the City because I had these 2 little babies. No, I started directing when I was doing these movies called the Jane Doe movies for the Hallmark Channel. I did 10 of them. So I started directing the movies then. Then I also directed Switched at Birth, which I was in for over 100 episodes on Freeform. So yeah, I started directing myself. They'll give you the job then.
And what has that meant to you? I mean, both personally and also professionally, to have made that transition, to be able to now be directing, to be working, but you don't necessarily have to be acting.
It's nice not to have hair and makeup all day and wear high heels and Spanx. I'll tell you that much. Phew. Just like quarantine, you know. You know what? I feel so blessed to have worked so much and to learn from. I feel so grateful to have learned from such masters like Howie Deutsch and Bob Zemeckis and John Milius and all the great people, Jimmy Burrows, and have worked with so many wonderful artists. As a director, I can use all that I've learned as a dancer, as a singer. I was a singer. I did cabaret on Broadway. I sing a lot for different charities. And as a dancer, all the ballets I did and all the music I studied, as a director, I can use it all. And I can use it to help teach and inspire a younger generation. And also, oftentimes I do understand that when you're in the middle of a run on a TV series, it's easy to get exhausted and to feel like you're not doing anything important. And I like to be able to try to bolster and inspire people when they're tired, and to remind them that what they're doing it's good and important. So using all the things that I have learned really is the wonderful thing about being a director. And I feel incredibly blessed. As an actor, you can use a lot of things, but not, it's harder to get the parts as a older actress that really challenge you. So I find it more rewarding to be able to direct.
I know, I think both you and your husband have both directed both of your daughters. What has it been like for you to sort of see the two of them kind of go into the business and be navigating like contemporary Hollywood?
Well, my daughter Zoe Deutsch has been in Set It Up and Why Him and Zombieland 2 and The Politician. So she's done a lot of great work as an actress, and she's in 2 magazines with all her fashion this week. And my daughter Maddie wrote, starred in, scored, and sang and performed 5 songs for our movie, The Year of Spectacular Men. She's like a quadrupled threat. And so my 2 daughters are, of course, my pride and joy. And to work with them and to direct them is interesting. It's really fun. I mean, it's fun. They're different than me. My husband is, we kind of like bred these Hollywood, these artists that are the best of both of us. And, I'm just so happy to see them working and doing interesting work. I think Maddie's moving towards being a writer-director right now, which it's funny to have 3 directors in the house, and Zoe's a producer as well. So you can imagine the funny conversations. It's just like a business, a family business at this point. But we all have different perspectives, which is really fun. I mean, my daughter Madeline was helping me with the self-tape today, and that's fun to just like let her direct me. And sometimes I do that with her and with Maddie and Zoe, and they do each other. It's a very fun dynamic and exciting. So I know that through the years, our worlds will intersect in different ways that way, but it's fun.
But do you feel like the Hollywood that they're encountering feels really different than the Hollywood you encountered when you were a young actress yourself getting started?
Yeah, well, it is really different and it's changing so quickly. No one even knows where it's going with the streaming this and the watching films on, paying for a film on your TV. And, um, Zoe's did Netflix and features, which is something I couldn't have gotten away with when I was her age and a movie star. I could never have done TV. I mean, there's also, really importantly, being a woman has changed a lot. Being a woman in this business has changed a lot. And so I'm really happy for them because they're much able to be much stronger than I was about their opinions and their, um, standing up for themselves. And, it was very interesting to me to do The Year of Spectacular Men with Maddie because it was written by a 23-year-old and it was from her perspective. And I would be like, "Are you sure we should do that?" And she'd be like, "Yep, that's what we're going to do." And I was like, okay. Um, just the world is changing so quickly, and the movie business is changing. So yeah, it's different, but a lot of things are the same. It's hard work. It's hard work. People don't know that. It's brutally difficult. They just think that we're like eating bonbons, but we're just killing ourselves for 13, 14, 15 hours a day. And I appreciate that my children know what hard work is and they're willing to do it.
And just my last question for you, and this is something you touched on a little bit already. With a movie like Back to the Future, what has it meant to you to have it be a movie that now, 35 years later, people still want to talk to you about? It still is beloved, as you said, by multiple generations now. What does that mean to you?
Well, it's impossible to imagine the amount of people who have seen the movie. Sometimes I remember like landing in Burbank and looking down and thinking like, I bet a lot of these people have seen Back to the Future, But, the people who are watching this, I want to say thank you. Thank you for letting me and all of us into your hearts and your lives and for all these years and for enjoying what we created so long ago with so much love. It really is a miracle and a gift. And I can't tell you how grateful I am to have been part of something like that in all of my movies, but whatever, especially this one, just to be able to make you just stop for a minute, stop worrying about whatever's going on and enjoy what we created, because it really is a back and forth thing. So I just want to say thank you. I'm super grateful.
Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you, of course, to all of our readers who voted for the movie. This is our week 10 winner. And our week 11 voting is now concluded. We had another round of 16 movies, including Die Hard, Fish Called Wanda, Boys in the Hood, Point Break, Eyes Wide Shut. And it came down to between two movies. It was between When Harry Met Sally and Die Hard, and just narrowly winning was the 1988 film directed by John McTiernan. Die Hard is our week 11 winner here. And so we'll have a conversation about Die Hard for everyone next week. And so for this week, Leah, thank you so much for joining us and being our guest today. Everybody,
Thank you,
it's
Mark.
Leah Thompson.
Thank you so much. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.
All right. Thank you.